Hello everybody. Apologies for being a little bit late. I almost wasn't sure I was going to make it. I'm just really dragged out today. But I decided that it might actually perk me up if I came out and hung out with all of you guys. So unfortunately, I was thinking about working on a base. We had a question last week about how you deal with integral bases if you want them to be a little bigger or you want to put the miniature on a different base. And I was going to show, like, kind of recreate how I did the base for my Sophie. I did not bring my Sophie. I think I have a photo somewhere. But I still want to do that, but I think it will be in a future episode. And today we're going to do some swatching and some talking and hanging out. Maybe I'll work with the super washes a little more. I think the last of them are up, so this is the last chance to get them for now, which is probably true of some of the other Reapercon stuff. And I have some of those things if you want to see any of them. I'm pretty sure all the miniatures are going to continue to be in production. And from what Ron said, they're going to keep this exemplar palette up on the store. And if you've been here before, you know I got one through their Kickstarter a while back, and I really like it. I usually use a different palette on stream because it's just a little more compact, and I have very little desk space when I have everything set up for streaming, because there's like the camera, and I have to move some other stuff around. My laptop's a lot closer than it normally is. So, plus I usually have my other palette with whatever, if I'm working on one, my real my ongoing project is, and I'm going to show you guys that. Maybe don't tell Ron I'm going to show you guys that. He spilled all the beans about what the miniature is and what the colors are for Halloween, but I thought I would let you see what my progress has been so far on painting the Halloween witch. I think it's Cynthia the Wicked. Is that what they said her name? I know it's Cynthia, and it was Cynthia the something. But I don't remember the something. And I don't think Ron had committed to naming the cat, because it really should be Cynthia and her little buddy. But since I was late even starting the stream, I had to text Quindy and say, yes, I really am alive and I'm starting the stream now. So if you got your notification late, that was not Twitch, that was me. So I'll give people a few more minutes to get here before I show the Halloween stuff, and I'll do some other things first. So if you want to see any of the Reapercon miniatures, I think I have them all here available to show you. The thing that I would imagine, or one of the things that I would imagine is not going to continue to be available, is this, since it even says Reapercon 2022 on the back. This is this awesome new Pokey Tool that Julie made for us. And I hear that there is going to be a Halloween Pokey Tool, which I don't think is going to be in the ghoulie bag. It sounded like it might not be available, starting October 1st, and that it would be a separate purchase, but I'm excited about that. A pumpkin seems like a very ergonomic shape, although I've liked this one a lot. It's not spiky at all. It fits kind of like you put it under that finger, and I find it actually a little bit easier than these. Now, I'm not sure if that's partly, I think they're using a pin with a slightly smaller diameter, so I get this guy out when something's being very recalcitrant, but usually this one, or the crow's nest one, does the trick with these longer pins, narrower pins. Then I like those. And then the other thing, I think, in terms of miniatures, well, that's not miniatures exactly, is the brush holder. So that is also, these are kind of commemorative, and I don't know if it actually says on there. Sometimes it says what it's for. This one looks like kind of a castle because of our dungeoneering theme. So that is the thing. I would imagine those two things will be temporary. So if you want them, get them now, but the miniatures I think are ongoing. And then of course the most important miniature release to talk about is that you can get many, many shroomies if you need them in your life. And I'm not saying that's a whole box of shroomies. You heard it in the background, but I'm also not saying that. I guess maybe when I do a base, I should put a shroomie on it, although I'm not sure that really goes with Sophie exactly, but who knows. But the other thing that is limited are the paints, and I thought I would swatch those out so that you can see the colors and decide whether or not you need those in your life. So these are the paints that I think were the swag bag paints. It will list the colors. So there's Rostop Mud, West Barrow Slate, and Barrowgate Copper, which is metallic, as we will see momentarily. And then the VIP bag ones, Key Slime Pie, I mean, it's worth it just for the fun, really. Amaryllis Pink and Platypus Teal, which I meant to look this up and I forgot. So if you have another device you can look at things on right now, you could go find this out yourself. But I hear that platypuses, platypi, their skin does look teal under a black light. So that's interesting. Let's see. I feel like I had adjusted the light, but now I'm not sure. All right. So if that's glaring out too white, let me know, because I don't think things always look the same on my screen as they do on other people's screens. And I will probably just use a blister pack. I like reusing blister packs for various things, and doing paint swatches is one of them. And in case we have any new people today, or who watch later on the video on demand or on YouTube. I see I use that one for basing stuff, so it's got weird things in it. I'm going to find another one. I'm going to show the other kind of swatch that I like to do. So this is the way I swatch for you all on paper, so that we can really see the undertone and lots of other stuff. But I like to swatch on my bottles like this. I think I have another example here. And these particular examples there isn't a lot of unexpected color in the undertone, but that does happen sometimes. And then I do a single swipe down the side that helps me see the opacity. So I can see that this, and this is one of the Halloween colors, Dungeon Slime, is somewhat opaque, but not completely. But this blue liner is super opaque. And I have not yet done my bottle swatches on my Reapercon paints. I'm going to save the Barrowgate Copper so that we don't get copper flakes in all of them. I will start with the Key Slime Pie. Quindy likes shroomies. I mean, how can you not? He's just such a happy-go-lucky little dude. I usually use a bit larger of a brush for swatches. I use this size, which is size 4. For the paper ones, I usually don't use quite as big for the bottle ones. I think I usually use a Reaper brush size 2 that it would appear I didn't clean out as well as I should have. Okay, I got it back. I keep meaning to be really cruel to some brushes and gunk them up with paint, and then test, and let them dry out a little bit, and then test some brush washing options on stream and let you guys see how they work. Because there are various things that I would use. So I try to get a good thick application at the top. This does look like a somewhat transparent paint, which is not surprising. The more intense a color is on a paint, the more likely it is to be a little transparent, because it probably means there's a lot of pigment and not a lot of white or brown or gray or black, which are all more opaque pigments, but also which dull things down. I think we can zoom in a little, and I will attempt to remember to show you the swatches again when they're dry, but if somebody pokes me later, because as previously mentioned, I'm not super alert today. So that does seem like something I would forget, because I need to be careful and put the swatch page somewhere to the side, lest I drop a miniature in it or something, especially that miniature I'm painting for Ron. We don't want that to happen. And then this is how I do the swatches for my bottles, other than I forgot one thing. So I try to get a good thick application. This is intended to show me what they would call the mass tone. So this is kind of what it would come out of the bottle, or even more for our purposes, what it would look like if I did, multiple base coats and had a solid coat of paint on there. And then that's my little swipe. And then because the labels can be a little, hold on just a second. Paint labels, especially some brands have almost like a plastic magazine, like a coated magazine page type of paper for their label. And if you use water on your paint, it's kind of like how if you put watered down paint on Bones Miniatures, it may not adhere. So I use a little brush on sealer, medium, to do the swatches on here, because that's essentially just clear acrylic paint. So it's a way to dilute the paint and make it thinner without having to use water that might beat up on the labels. And then I also have to be careful and put this somewhere I will not stick things in it. Very big challenge for me. I think I got it all off, but yesterday I finished painting and I was just like covered in paint. And I'm like, how did I even do that? I don't remember doing messy, messy things. So here's Amaryllis Pink, which offhand I do not remember what an amaryllis looks like. So I do not know how accurate this is. I believe that the ladies in paint chose the colors and the names for these. And one of them must know the interesting fact about the platypus to have chosen that. You can compare the key slime pie is darker than Dungeon Slime. So you've got a highlight for your slime if you get the goodie bag, or if you already have Dungeon Slime, because Dungeon Slime is a release paint. The other paint that is coming in the goodie bag is custom for Halloween. And I have some of that. I don't know if mine is like an initial prototype batch. I suspect it might be. It's just a hair shiny. And I'm going to be able to solve that where it comes up, which is only going to come up in like a solid coat. It's not shiny enough that I've used it for shadows and some other functions, and it's not shiny enough that it makes any difference for that. But I noticed when I did the hair on my prototype, or test paint, that I will show you in just a minute, that it did look just a little shiny, so I'm going to add some anti-shine additive when I'm painting. But my guess is that if that is a test batch, which I think it is since my label looks like this, not like a real label, that they will add the usual amount of matting agent to the production run. But in the event that any of you get one that's slightly shiny, or if you have other paints that are a little bit shiny, some companies prefer more of a satin finish in their paints. And if you're someone who likes all your paints to be super matte, you don't have to wait until you seal. There, you can use the anti-shine agent additive to very judiciously. You just add like a tiny, like I would just dip my brush in and then mix it into a pool of paint. Because if you've ever had sealer frost over, that's the frosting is because of matting agent. So matting agent is like little particles, it's little particulate matter. And the way it works to make things less shiny is, light rays travel in a straight line. So if you think of all the rays coming down, my fingers are a bunch of light rays. They all come down and come off the surface like at the same angle, and that makes something look very glossy. So if you add these little pieces of particulate in there, it breaks them up so that when the light rays come down on the surface, they fly off in different directions, and then the surface doesn't look shiny anymore. But the downside of that is they are actual little pieces of material. So if you get too many of them, you start to make your surface look white or frosted. Sometimes with spray sealers, I think that you can spray again and it might solve it, or you can gloss over it and then spray again and it might solve it. But it's whether you have a spray or a brush on, if you have something matte, and it's in the paint too, but it's less likely to come up in the paint. That's why you need to shake things really well before you use them. Val Under the Red has been using Maggot White as a highlight color for Dungeon Slime, sometimes with a thin yellow glaze to shift the hue back to the yellow greens. Yeah, I think Dungeon Slime would work well for that. Even just white, because it's so light a color. White will work too, or at least for your final highlight. So that's the VIP Triad, which we will look at again when it's dry, because dry paint can look just a little bit different, partly because of the matting thing. Then these are the paints that were in the, I think it was just called Swag Box. So they should just be called Swag Box paints on the website. And this is a nice, gross, dungeony green. I get to use my, it's flowing, but it's just not flowing enough. I can kind of feel that there was probably a little piece of plastic in there. And I think khaki paints are very useful. So. I would enjoy that as a color for like orcs and things like that. I don't like to use super bright greens usually. But also vegetation and whatnot. So anyone do anything super fun this weekend? Or unusual, or get some painting done? You've been trying to, oh, that one's nice, no pick. You've been trying to get done. Oops, I think I just got pink in my khaki, which will make brown. We don't want to do that. We want to know what this color looks like. But I like to do this thing with the thin down on my bottles, partly just to know more about the paint, but I like to use glazes a lot, and it gives me good clues about which paints are going to be good for glazing. Whisperow Slate. Valander finished painting Dragonling bust that he sculpted a couple weeks ago. Wow, that sounds pretty cool. Nuffles Tissue has been painting a 1/35th scale King Tiger from Tamiya, and Valander also got Shavrinya the Slayer to tabletop ready. I'm sure that I am not saying that name right. The saying of names is not one of my particular skills. You all know, if you've been here for more than 5 seconds, how much I like off grays, or not neutral grays, grays that have a little more going on. And this one looks like it has just a little hint of blue. On my screen it looks like a lot of blue, but in person it's just a little hint of blue, which is nice for like steel weapons or cool color rocks, stuff like that. And we have a decent selection of warm grays, but we haven't had a lot of cool grays. Now, of course, if you are someone who likes to have just a small number of paints, you can just take a neutral gray and add a little bit of blue to it. That will totally work. You do not need to buy a specific cool gray paint. I like to have lots of different paints, so I'm happy to have that as an option. And it looks decently opaque, which is good. I find that for applications where I'm using gray, I prefer more opacity to less. I don't know if you can hear a sad cat in the background. I'm guessing another sad cat will be joining us too. She was wandering around, being very tragic right before I started the stream, so I'm assuming that she's going to come in and ask for petting. Unless we magically solved her problem. That she's very bad at, most cats, like if the bowl is empty, they go when they walk beside the bowl when they're yelling and they say, hey, look over here, there's a problem, you should fix it. This cat is not good at doing that. She wanders around yelling, but she never really gets specific about what the problem is. Like her default is just to start walking towards the bedroom, which means she wants petting, but she doesn't always want petting. It's just, she's like, oh, you're following me now, I'll go over here and do this. But then you give her the petting, and 5 minutes later, the yelling begins again. It's like, well, that was not your problem. Why don't you show me the problem? But alas, she just never really figured out how to show you the problem. But that's okay. I guess sometimes we're like that as people too. We get annoyed about stuff, but we don't even really know what we're annoyed about. All right, so that is a very pretty copper. I like that a lot. Yeah, I'm gonna have to ponder what I could use that on. So I'm gonna put these somewhere so that I don't put them on me, and then hopefully I will remember to show you later. And because I don't know that I have the official paint, I'm gonna show you the Halloween colors, but on a less nice piece of paper. So that was nice watercolor paper. This is just index card. Queenie says, your Greet sits on the toilet and cries to tell me that she can see part of the bottom of her food bowl. If she wants attention, she goes in the kitchen and bangs the cabinet door while she cries. That seems like she should be doing the opposite, but that's cats for you. They don't like to make sense. They do not find that a high priority at all. Carrie Michael Cosby, one of our cats will bite our ankles and try to herd us to the food bowl, in addition to yowling. He has become a grumpy old man. Yeah, she is becoming a bit of a grumpy old lady. I joke around, but I question whether she's being haunted by the spirit of our grumpy old man cat that died a few years ago, who is like, we thought he would come back and haunt us, but he came up with an even more dastardly plan, which was to make the nice cat annoying. He's very crafty like that. Be a very Archer thing to do. So this is Dungeon Slime, and when Ron told me these colors, I was kind of like, okay, how am I going to make this work? And then I came up with some interesting ways to make it work. Valender the Red. My cats just start dragging their bowls across the kitchen floor when they're empty, making sure to make as loud a scraping noise as they can. Well, see, those are some cats that know how to be very direct about what they find the problem to be. They are not confused at all about what they want and how to convey that. So this purple is a little transparent, and I have found ways to deal with that I'm going to. So I'm trying to remember to take work in progress pictures and all that good stuff. And so I will have information to share about the painting that I did after I finish it. But you guys get a little preview now. So what I did for my test figure that I will show you momentarily. I don't know. I might have a picture of the digital goofing around I was doing. So those are the two colors that are going to be in the glue bag. And I will put that aside as well. And I will try to remember to come back and look at them after, and we can see. Hopefully you'll be able to see that it's not like very shiny. It's like satin maybe. Let's get the backdrop for miniatures. So before I wanted to paint on the Halloween figure, I thought I should do some tests. So I had a couple of spare Giselles, so I used her as a test. And I don't know how obvious it's going to be on screen, because it ends up not being as obvious in some ways as I would expect. But where did it go? So I actually started with these as tests. So this is an orangey kind of skin color where I used the glue bag purple, Wolfsbane purple is the name now, to mix the shadow colors for the skin, and I used the Dungeon Slime to mix highlight colors. And then I was testing it with a few other different colors. So this color was not a Reaper color, and because I'm painting this for Reaper, and I like to share the information with you guys, especially since it is, you know, a specific paint set that's coming with the figure. I mixed up my own version with a couple of Reaper colors. So that is Red Neon Glow and Gnome Flesh, I think. I don't know. I have it all written down, and I have the paint somewhere else, so I know what they are. I just don't know off the top of my head. Quindy says those are great spooky colors, and the Grey Mouser says the Reaper Force is strong with purples. I agree. And Valender says anteals and pinks and oranges. Also true. So here I tested more of kind of a neutral skin tone, and I did not like the results as much. I mean, the shade works nicely, but I didn't think the highlight worked as well. Then this, I mixed up like a very orange one, and that just seemed like too much. I think it was a little too dark in value. So this is the skin color I think I ended up mixing. And I have, oh, there, it's on the back. So that when I mixed up the colors, like on my actual palette to use, and you look at it, it doesn't look as, so this looks very unnatural, and you can see all the oranges and the green and everything. But it's a useful tool for me to be able to tell whether something like blends at all. Like you can see that this kind of works better than that one, although all of those basically work. But when I mix the colors up on my palette, again, I feel like it doesn't look bright enough. These were the mixes. There was a slightly darker purple that I do not currently remember the name of that I used for the darker shadows. But even, I mean, you can see the greeny yellow, but it's not super in your face. So you really, as long as your middle color is kind of what the art people would call local value, the color that the thing actually is under a neutral light, or, you know, normal light, full spectrum light, whatever you want to call it, you can get funky in the shadows and the highlights, and usually it will still work. So if anything, I kind of wanted it to look a little more unnatural than it does since she's a witch, but I thought it worked pretty well. And then this one was just doing the purple highlighted with the green, which is what the hair is, and I don't know if there's just a little bit of shine on the hair. Yeah, I think you can see just a little bit of the shininess that I will be adding tiny wafer thin mint of anti-shine additive too. And then, you know, there's green in the highlights on that purple too, which is a lighter one. And it's, again, not super obvious. And then I just mixed black and the Dungeon Slime together to create the highlights for this dress. And I ended up really liking this color. I mean, I don't think this is like exclusively a Halloween black. I think that I could use that in other contexts. But one of the reasons I went with this orangey skin tone, and there is a pumpkin on the actual figure, but orange, green, purple is a classic color scheme triad, and one that I particularly enjoy. Since I already knew I had a green and a purple, it made sense to look at orange, even if there wasn't a pumpkin on the figure, which there is. And I will probably be using, there's a pumpkin orange that was a promotional color in previous years. I will probably use pumpkin orange because I'm sure a lot of Reaper fans have it. But I will try to figure out an alternate color that will work with the colors that I'm going to use. Which, again, I'm probably going to use the green in the highlights on the purple because it's a yellowy green. It should work fine to highlight the orange. And, I mean, on the pumpkin. And then use the purple in the shadows, although I'll probably have to add a darker color as well because purple shades orange pretty well. So that's where she is so far. I'm going to tilt her down. Look, you know how it is with figures that have hat brims and whatnot. It does make it hard to see their face, but if you get the right angle, you can get a pretty nice look at her face. So I'm not as far along as I'm sure Ron would like me to be, and as I would like to be. So that's one reason not to tell him what you saw today, but hopefully I will get further along tonight. I'm going to do, I was going back and forth about the other colors to do things. And I did some tests, and since I had this girl, I just did digital tests over this figure. Let's see if I can find them on my phone even. Okay, let's see if I can find my phone first. And I sent them to Ron, and then he's like, well, I really like how you did this fade from the black to the green. And I'm like, well, it's not supposed to be a fade. It's supposed to just be an example of what would this look like if it were green instead. So this is a picture of the figure I just showed you as designed. And then the hat is really black with purple highlighting. It doesn't show on that angle. So it just looks like there's way too much purple on her head. I'm not going to paint the real figure that way. It was just testing something. So then I grabbed a pumpkin I had from something I painted a long time ago and spliced that in and changed that. Because he said he thought since they're giving you the Dungeon Slime and the purple that there should be large areas on the figure that have both of these colors in use. And that makes sense. So I'm like, well, if I make the bodice, which goes to about to her hips on the figure, that green. But Ron interpreted this as a, fade from the lighter green to the darker green. And he thought that was really cool. And I'm like, well, that's not what I meant. But okay, I will give it a shot just to make him happy. And then I think I will bring the orange up into the hat brim so that the pumpkin isn't the only place the orange shows up. And then I'm not going to go straight orange, but I'm going to do like an orangey brown for at least some of her pouches and belt strap and stuff. Again, if you have a color on a figure, it's good to have it in at least 3 places. It's also good to, you know, instead of constantly introducing new colors, mix things together to create another color. And that's one of the things that helps color schemes harmonize that you may not realize people are doing when you look at illustrations or miniatures or anything else that's multiple colors. Waffles Enjoyer. What's the difference between MSP Core, MSP Bones, and MSP Pathfinder? My understanding is that in terms of words, they have now combined the MS Core and the MSP Bones. The main difference is that the Bones paints were formulated, as were the... What did they... Now I can't even remember the line that there was before. They're formulated to be a little more opaque, so they're a little more accessible to people who are tabletop painting and want things that, you know, they're going to have to paint fewer coats of. And then they're not formulated in triads. So the MSP Core paints, the majority of them are formulated in a triad. I do not think I have a triad with me. But so it'll be 3 paints that are intended to work together, where one of them's like your mid-tone, one of them's the color, highlight color, and one of them's the shadow color. Oftentimes, those of us who are always pushing you to paint with more contrast do not think that those the triad goes light enough or dark enough, and it may be that, you know, you have to mix a step in between a shadow color and the mid-tone color, or you'll get you know, transition lines or something. It's not intended that you just paint straight out of the bottle and it's going to make like a perfect, smooth, amazing blend. But there are colors that are formulated to work together, where I'm showing you I'm using like weird green and weird purple as highlights and shadows. Not everyone's comfortable doing that. They want like, okay, this is blue. I want a light blue I know is going to work to highlight this color, and I want a dark blue that I know is going to work to make the wash or my layer shades. And that's what the triad system is there for. The Bones paints are individuals, so you have to work that out on your own, what you want to mix together to make lighter or darker versions of those. But they're a little more opaque. So if you take an average MSP Core red and an average red from the Bones line, you're more likely to only have to do 2 or 3 coats of a red from the Bones line. You may have to do more coats to get completely opaque coverage with the MSP Core line. Or like this kind of ghoulie bag purple. If this was coming out and they still had the original system, this would come out as an MSP Core because it's a little bit transparent. The Pathfinder paints are produced through Pathfinder. They picked the colors, so the people at Pathfinder picked out the colors. They gave Anne Forrester, who was the paint mixer at the time, the Pantone numbers of those colors, and she mixed the paints to match them. They're the same formulation as the Bones in the sense that they're intended to work well for tabletop painting and require fewer coats for opaque coverage. And they're the same in the sense that there are no triads, they're just individual colors. There are some really amazing colors in there. I love that set. If you have no paint, like if you're just starting out, or you know a friend who's just starting out and they have no paint and they're like, I want to buy a set of paint, which one could I get to start with? I would not recommend the Pathfinder set because the color selection is really cool, but there aren't like enough dark colors and enough light colors to do that mixing as well as with an average, you know, here's 30 or 60 or whatever paints come in a kind of starting set of colors. So I think they're great if you already have some paints and you want to add to them, especially they have a lot of really neat pinks and purples, some nice skin tones. There's some other cool colors in there too. But because they're under license, it is also possible that they won't be available forever. Reapers had licensed paints in the past. It was Heavy Gear, I think, was one of them. And you can no longer get those colors because eventually licenses elapse and people don't want to continue them. So then the other alternative, so these are both digital mock-ups. The other alternative I talked to Ron about was doing her, you know, kind of Wicked Witch style and make the skin the green part, which I kind of liked the look of. I thought that was pretty fun. And if you end up liking the look of that, it's the same recipe. It's the same color mix. You just apply it to the skin instead of wherever I have put it. I think that, yeah, that is all of the Halloween-y pictures I have. So that was kind of how I got here, because I know choosing colors is hard, so I think it doesn't hurt sometimes for those of us who have to do it as giving you guys examples, talk through the thought process. So that is the thought process so far. I'm going to use kind of these colors to highlight the black boots, which is going to have to be the part that I paint next, since I'm not going to be able to paint any of these things. Well, to put it another way, if I paint this and this first and then I attempt to paint this, it is not going to go well for me. So I'm going to paint the boots next, and then the cape. I'm going to use the same colors on the hat, but I'm going to try applying the paint in a different way so that it looks like a different textured surface. So I'm going to use stippling. Ballinger says a lot of the Pathfinder paints are not quite as pigment dense as they had to specifically match exact Pantone shades and had a rush to do it. I don't know if there was a rush, but yeah, they were matching someone else's color choices, and made color choices for the Reaper line based on, I mean, she has art training from college, and then she had a lot of knowledge of how the paint works and how pigments work from working on the paint line. So she, and being a miniature painter, so she would come at color decisions from a different direction than Pathfinder is like, these are colors that thematically match this, cultural group or monster type or whatever other things they were choosing from. Because if you look at the names of them, a lot of them match things from the Pathfinder world. So there's not much on the back yet. The hair will be purple, and then the skirt will be purple. So that will be the next part I work on after the black, and then fun with orange. And it's unfortunate that I got sick and I'm not going to have enough time, because what I was originally going to do, because when Ron gave this to me, I'm like, so, and the cat should be orange, right? Because I have an orange cat. Well, one of them. The other cat is the kind of cat that I would not want to paint on miniature scale, because she's like, parts are white and parts are tabby, and it's too visually, there's too much going on to scale down, and also that would be annoying to paint. So I was going to actually paint the cat orange and then repaint it black just to bug Ron. Take pictures and then fix it to be the way he wanted it. But alas, I have been too knocked out to make that feasible. And then just to give you a color comparison, I have the other Giselle this one was painted on stream. So I did her dress around, I can't remember, I think the show actually might have fallen on Valentine's Day. So I did like a pink episode, and then there was a follow-up one later. So I painted this, I painted like this brain, and then I painted like a leech, one of the giant leeches. With different kinds of pinks, and to show you different ways that you can use pinks. I probably had some of the Pathfinder pinks in that show. I do not recall at this time. And then I think her face was painted on one of the episodes where I talked about painting darker skin. Or I used the same colors that I ended up, I think I did 2 episodes on darker skin, and one of them I was trying to paint, these gaming scale miniatures, and then because of the camera resolution and stuff, I got a giant the next week and worked on things in a way that I hoped you could see a little better. But I just thought it was interesting to contrast, a natural human skin tone with this one that has the purple and the green in it, and then just what the different colors of dress look like. And it's kind of, I always find it fun to see the same figure painted different ways, and what you can do with just paint in terms of changing the mood or personality of a character type and stuff like that. So I thought, since I had that other figure, which alas is not finished, I do want to finish her. I can't figure out what color to paint her hat and veil, ribbon, I don't know what they call the thing that hung off of the hats like that. So I'm still waffling on that one. Speaking of making color decisions, I'm not always amazing at that either. Let's see if the sample colors have dried as soon as I figure out what I do with them. Almost. Close enough. Close enough to see. There's just a little wet there. I'm not sure that this is wet. But no, yeah, I think that's actually just a little bit shiny. Maybe I didn't shake that one well enough. I wonder. That platypus teal is pretty cool. I like it. And then this is the nice thing about doing color swatches on stream is that you get to see the full effect of metallics, where if I take a picture of this, it will not look as cool because it's just one static view of the light hitting that. I suspect, well, this one isn't quite as dry, but so that shininess is wetness, really. But there was just a little sheen when I painted the hair, so to be cautious, I'm going to put in a tiny smidge of, nope, that's not it. This is the product I'm talking about, which as far as I know, only Reaper sells this separately. So you can get like matte medium from a lot of different art supply paint places, or miniature paint. Some miniature paint brands sell matte things too, but Reaper gives us this so we can add it to our paints directly and not have to add any transparent stuff. Waffles and Dryer, I believe the Reapercon VIP Triads are limited edition. They usually are. Usually the swag bag one is probably limited edition too. Sometimes if something's really popular, it'll come back or get added to the line, but as a rule, the special event paints, like the purple that comes out in the ghoulie bag, may also be limited edition as well. The Dungeon Slime isn't. That Dungeon Slime already exists if you want to go grab some and paint some slimy dungeon stuff. So then, speaking of swatches, these are the super washes, and because of how these paints work, 3D swatches essentially seemed like the way to go, even though that's a little more of a pain in the butt. And I've got 11 of them done, so I'm going to do the last one with you guys. And what I decided to do was, so this is the paint as it comes out of the bottle, and they chose to go with a very pigmented version, which I don't think is a bad choice, because then you can use, I used brush on sealer to create these. So this is the Chestnut Brown. I have like a whole row of these guys. Unfortunately, I can't move the camera to show you. But it's like Taste the Rainbow works. But don't Taste the Rainbow works because they're quite spiky. And actually, while I was prepping, I bruised my fingers, I think, because of handling all these. It's hard getting them on and off the little paint holders too, because they're very spiky dudes. So this is the leather brown. Yeah, this is the leather brown. And I wanted to use these guys because it's a nice, like it's a really broad mix of surfaces. So you can see that this kind of paint, and I've heard the same complaint about contrast and Army Painter speed paints and everything else, that they're not great on really flat surfaces, which makes sense because the whole point of them is to kind of congregate in crevices and stuff, like how it's gone into his muscles. So when Ron and I were talking about what models would work well to do 3D swatches on, I thought these guys were great because they have the chainmail, they have the fur, they have those burly muscles, they have some flat areas on the sword and the shield, and it gives us a nice kind of mix to see what the paint's going to do. And then I decided not to paint the bases so that it was clear what the underlying surface was, because these miniatures are gray. These are the new Bones USA version, and it's possible that there's a little bit of gray in the crevices. And then I actually painted like the upper torso area. I'm not sure it's very obvious, but I was concerned that it wasn't like super white, so I painted like this section with a coat of pure white paint on all of them as well. So yeah, you can kind of see that there's not much gray there, and there's a little more gray there. I found that in the end, that wasn't as obvious as I might have thought, because these kinds of paints are best applied over white or light color, or zenithal can work too. But I found that those gray crevices didn't make as much of a difference as I expected. So this is the something purple. Drow Violet, which I like a lot. I think that's a cool color. And now I can see just a few little places where I was trying to be really good and catch all of the, I'm very bad about leaving little white spots, and I was turning them around all these different angles looking for the white spots, which is also a good trick for if you're looking for mold lines on a figure and you're having trouble spotting them. Turning at different angles so the light will hopefully catch that little line is helpful. But sometimes, and I get this with base coats too, sometimes the paint has to dry before I see the places where I did not do very well. This is Mythos Magenta, which is useful as a mixing color, even if you don't think you're gonna paint too many things magenta. I mean, I'd paint things magenta. See, look at all these places I missed. Yeah, that's places I missed. That's not a scratch or anything. Unfortunately, this very narrow base doesn't want to stand up as much as I would like it to. I have a rolling cart that I move around. Every time I move it, these guys all fall over like dominoes because I have them lined up in a little rainbow row. Well, not rainbow order, but I just enjoy seeing the colorfulness. This is the darker green, which is called Dark Bow Green. Then the lighter green is some other green. Emerald green. And these are currently available on the website, but whatever they have is the last stock for now. And this is kind of a soft release because if you do get these, or you have a friend who gets them and you get to play around with them a bit, Reaper would like your feedback on what you think of them before they decide to make a whole bunch. Because just having my feedback is only so useful. This is something yellow. Let's find out. Gilded Yellow. These are the banana works, I guess. There you can see the effect of the light color. By having done like a pure white coat, just there, you can see a lot more on this yellow. See if we can see it on red. There are two reds. This is the darker red. Do I remember what this one is called? No, I do not. Blood-Kissed Red. Oh, what's that? Yep, there's a white spot in the... Chainmail is always such a pain to paint because you get those little white spots. No matter how hard you try not to get those little white spots. But I should be able to come back in and fix that. And now I see a spot I missed on this guy's arm brand. Jeez, I was way worse at this than I thought. This is one of the things I've been doing while I don't feel so great, so I guess that's probably why they have some boo-boos. Because when I'm extra spaced out, I'm like, well, at least I could paint an orc. That's not rocket science. This is the lighter red that is Templar red. So I would, when I've been painting these with, you know, as intended, I've tended to start with kind of that wash down color, or, you know, thinned, diluted color, and then come back in the shadows and applied full strength or darker colors to build up the shadows. Since the whole point of these is working over white, and it's definitely a shift in how you approach things if you're not used to it. Yeah, I think there's a few places I missed on this guy. This is Tempest Blue. Because when you're working over white, you're relying on the white to create the highlights. So you have to work out ways to leave enough of that showing through to do the job. And depending on the color that you're working with, or, you know, the opacity of the paints or the intensity of the pigments, that may be easier or less easy to do. And this is Bone Shade. It's an interesting color. I like it. Yes, bone shaped. I don't know if it's the color, I think, of bones being thinned down it is. I did try this on a skeleton that I don't think I have handy. What did I do with those guys? They should be right here. And they are. There we go. So I did it on a skeleton, full strength. And that is too dark a skeleton for me. I would need to... And I had done that with I had prototype ones where I used the black, and I'd done the same thing with that. So I ended up dry brushing over. We could try dry brushing over this guy maybe. So that's 11 of the 12 colors, and I will do the 12th color, which is the black. Now, Nox Black. But here are some of the other guys I painted with this. Some of these are the prototype ones I had. Some of these are the release ones. I got a bigger dragon. I need to prime him white, though, before I can try this color shift technique on him. And then I had some in progress ones from Reapercon, which this one I was trying to paint him as much as possible to look like the one from the Learn to Paint kit. And I have, so this guy was one that is, I thought he was completely primed white. And then this was a Zenithal one. So I thought I would do like a little compare and contrast maybe. Try and paint him with the same colors. Because Zenithal probably makes this even quicker for tabletop purposes, where you don't have to go back in and add shadows, or you don't have to do it as much. This is one of those orcs painted with multiple colors instead of just one color. He's not a rainbow orc. He's a traditional everyday orc. And then the other two I had were ogres that won't even fit in this window size that I have allowed for. I've got a few sections that aren't metal left to paint on him, but I think most of them are metal. And then there's a few sections on her. Maybe I'll try to work on his base. I didn't finish up. Why is this not focusing? I didn't finish up his base, and I really liked them for that. Like, I think you could start with just like a flat gray and then just use these to do like quick base painting. Well, okay, not just stone. You could probably do dirt and other things as well. But let me protect my little paper. And I will start by doing the last set of works. The green fellow look familiar somehow. Yeah, it's a lot of works. I think I still have 2 left. So I'm debating whether to do like a different strength dilution or what to do with my 2. I prepped up a few extras just in case. And I did have a couple that when I didn't take off like all the mold lines and stuff, but there was a little, when the plastic or the plastic resin, I don't know what it is, it's like a resin, comes in the molds, or the metal molds work the same way. There are little channels, and there was a little piece of a channel sticking up on the sword that I took off. There was one on the side of his chin. I feel like there was some other thing that I should have shaved that off, and I didn't. So I didn't go nuts prepping those guys, but I did want to at least make them a little presentable. So I am going to shake this up on my thing. So apologies if, yeah, the screen is shaking because I have my vortex mixer on my desk. I shook the other paints before we started. So I'm going to take that out of the frame because the camera would far rather focus on a palette than on a miniature, in my experience. So, not sure why, but I guess starting at the top made sense to me for some reason, although probably starting at the bottom would be less likely to mess things up. But I started with the sword on all of them. So this is a really nice, cool black. It's almost a blue black that will become more apparent when I do the diluted version. But you can see that they're, and they're not super thick. I know people feel like they look thick when I'm working on them online, and I had a little thing where I tested the dilution, and I don't know what I've done with it. But they're only slightly less fluid than the currently available Reaper washes. They just look a little more gel-like, but I don't think they move quite as much because you need to have a little more control. Like if I wasn't painting this whole guy, and I'm like, well, I just want this paint to stay on his hand. If it was too fluid, it would travel, you know, onto the bracers and other places. And having some control over it and keeping your areas white is important to making it less of a pain in the butt to paint the whole thing. Like even on those ogres, because I am a messy painter, I'm going to have to do, I've already done a little bit of cleanup actually. I think I already cleaned up some of those places. But I'll have to come back over with white to fix that up before I paint his pouch, or there's going to look like there's a blob on his pouch because they're semi-transparent, so they show stuff underneath. Ah, that ogre almost fell over. They are big, beefy miniatures. So when using any kind of wash or glaze, even base coats, this is helpful to do, but you want to kind of have a wet leading edge and break things into sections as much as possible. So if I like left that and then I came over here and painted and then I came back and this had already started to dry, that line along the edge where the paint is drying would just be there forever. And when you're working with techniques that are using some transparency of paint as washes, as this kind of, I don't know, I think I've been calling it tint and wash is the generic term I've come up with for this idea. Glazes are certainly very transparent paint over. You will see those little lines forever unless you repaint stuff. So I kind of isolated the shoulder pad as an island because now it's its own section. I don't have to worry as much. But then I got some paint over on the strap behind his back. So like that's going to have to be the next part I paint. But I can, like this little island of his arm bracer, armor, whatever it is, wrist guard. I can leave that forever. I can come back and paint that tomorrow. And because it's isolated, it's not going to have funky transition lines. I'm not seeing much bubbling. I do get bubbling sometimes because I'm impatient and paint quickly. The combination of the brush going over texture creates bubbles in any kind of paint, in my experience anyway. But I usually just blow those out and it takes care of them. If there's a very stubborn one, I might rinse out my brush and pop it with the point or move it to the side or something. I remember years ago painting one of the Sandra Garrity angels, and she sculpted like she looks on a cloud, and then I was painting it as a gift for someone, so I kind of extended the cloud, and those swirly sections of the cloud just were like Bubble City when I was painting it. It was such a pain, and that was kind of the first time I was like, oh, is it because there's a lot of texture? Is that why I'm getting the bubbles? I think because it was a light gray paint, I noticed it more too. So maybe there are a bunch of bubbles in this black and I'm just not seeing them. It is harder to see where it's pooling too thickly, because when that happens, I'll just come in, you know, with the tip of the brush and just take some of the paint from a section where there's too much paint and put it on wherever I'm working it. But that's one of those things, like you have to get it fairly quickly while that paint's still wet, or you're gonna lift paint and get weird lines and stuff. So it is a shame that I left the black to be the one that it'll be more obvious when we do the diluted black. we will go through this again and find out the places where I put too much paint. But because it's black, Ron said they'd prefer to make it too opaque so that you're getting black out of the gate, and then you can dilute it down for other purposes, which I will show you on this guy's not quite twin brother in a minute. I'm not doing an amazing job of my leading edge argument right now, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. I'm working on an article for my patrons. I normally what I produce is available to everyone, so it's, you know, mostly stuff on my blog, but I have a YouTube channel, or like post pictures on my Facebook page or whatever. And the people on my Patreon are really supporting me taking time away from paid painting work to do that. But as a thank you, I like to every now and then give them something that is exclusive. And last year I gave them like an exclusive document about my painting of a mermaid that I painted for Reapercon last year. And this year I'm going to be giving them kind of some extra information on the Reapercon Sophie that I painted, mostly about non-metallic metal, because that was a buttload of non-metallic metal. And now I can't remember why I started this story. Oh, it's about taking my own advice. So one of the things I was mentioning to them that I did actually manage to do on Sophie was take my own advice. When you're, even just something like I mixed up this wash or this highlight color, it's good to start on a less obtrusive part of the figure. So like if I'm working on the skin for something, or in the case of the Sophie, I was painting a lot of non-metallic metal. I started painting the leg armor first. The leg armor is not going to be the part that gets the most scrutiny. So if I mess something up, if I have bad transitions, or my whole, you know, the way I was applying the paint wasn't ideal, or whatever other thing happened, I needed to change the colors a little, it was going to make the least difference on, you know, the back of the calf or whatever. That's not where people are going to be spending the most time looking at the figure. Generally, they're going to be looking here the most. So like when I'm working on skin, as I make, you know, shadow mixes or highlight mixes or whatever, the ideal way to do it would be to start on, you know, the back of the leg or the forearm or something. I usually don't. I usually do go straight to the face because I get excited about painting faces and skin and I like it. But if I'm being smart and remembering, I will do that. So if my mixes aren't right, you know, my paint's a little too opaque or something and I'm getting streaks, it's going to happen somewhere where I don't care as much, and it's easier, you know, if I don't get the fix exactly right, people aren't likely to notice as much. So that's one of those things of taking my own advice that I am not always great at. And I'm trying to be better about the leading edge thing, but apparently I'm not always perfect at that either. That doesn't mean it's not good advice. Maybe you know it's good advice because I'm bad about doing it. I don't know. You know how it is. It's always easier to give advice than to take it, and apparently that applies even to just slapping some paint on a miniature. That's funny because I think these guys are actually called Black Orcs. Like, I think that's the tribe. And now he really is a Black Orc. This poor brush, I think, is probably going to be exhausted by the end of these guys. I mean, I know it has been a class brush because that's what that little piece of red tape on the end means. I used to have... I don't think I do it as much anymore because the tape started to come off and then it was sticky and that made me crazy. But it was a handy way when I'm doing something like a paint and take or doing classes. It made it very easy to distinguish. These are brushes that I intend for everyone to be able to use, and these ones are maybe ones I loaned out or that they're my brushes. Or they might be someone else's brushes. Just help find which things to put away after the event and which things might belong to someone else. So I could just put out a set of brushes and say, you can just grab any of the ones that have the red tape on the end. But alas, I need to do it with paint or something instead that is not sticky, because it makes me crazy that it's sticky on the end. I also keep meaning to come up with some kind of designation system for like that for my own brushes, because I'll have you know, my good brush, my current best brush of a given size, but I'll keep the old ones and use them for, you know, doing washes or dry brushing or painting metallics or other things that painting bases is pretty rough on a brush. They're still useful, they're just not my go-to brushes for painting detail. And well, that's a great big bubble that I made by poking my brush in there. And I keep meaning to come up with a system. Like, I guess it would have to be, I paint the end of the you know, the current best brush white, and then whenever it gets transitioned to the next level, you know, maybe I paint it over it with yellow, and then when it goes to the, brush is pretty much trashed, I paint over it again with green or something. I don't know. It seems like there should be a way to designate them that I can just use transparent color or color theory or something where I don't have to completely paint over it. Then I also have to not be lazy, which, yes, that'll happen. That will happen, and my plan will come to fruition. I don't. Does anyone have like a brush organization system where they keep track of which brush is for which thing? Is this a craziness that only I have needed to do as yet? See, this is why it's hard to see if there's little places you missed, because it's shiny. And then is it a shiny spot or is it a white spot? Even on this black, I bet I'll goof up. But I like to goof up on stream so that you all know everybody goofs up. I know Anne does that too, and then we have to fix the goof. And then hopefully you know how to fix goofs, or just that you can. Just knowing that that's how we do it. I'm thinking about writing a blog post about the person that I spoke to at Reapercon, because I know this is far from... I may be the only person who needs some extravagant brush organization system, but this experience is very common. So a gentleman who usually talks to me at Reaper events was talking to me, and he was mentioning how he'd been talking to this person elsewhere in the con, and she'd never painted before, and she was really scared to try. And I get that. And then even once you have painted before, there's something else you're scared to try. You're scared to try a new kind of paint like this, or you're scared to try non-metallic metal, or you're scared to try wet blending, or what, you know, maybe even you normally paint things like orcs, and you're scared to try painting a nice young kid or something figure, because that's so different from what you normally paint. And we get all in our heads and torment ourselves with these things, and it's just paint. I mean, you can paint over it and then it looks different. Or even say you do paint something and it's really, really horrible, like it's just the worst thing ever. You painted it at home, no one ever has to know. I mean, you just never show anyone that miniature, and no one ever has to know that you painted the worst miniature ever. And then you probably learned something from that, because you can look at it and go, well, why is this the worst miniature ever? Is it just that these colors don't go together, or, you know, I didn't do X, or I could have done Y? It's a learning experience. It is really not something to be terrified about. And I'm not judging, because I have certainly, there have been a lot of things I've been afraid to do in painting. And that was one reason I used to enter contests a lot in earlier years, is because it would force me to, like, okay, I've studied OSL or whatever thing for years, and now this contest kind of theme or whatever would require me to use that information. So this will push me past the fear to actually do it. Did I just rub a bunch of paint off of him when I put him down in the corner? No, I did not. All right, we'll put him, no, I don't want to put him near the nice witch because she's looking very pretty. And then we'll do the next guy. And I did 2 drops of sealer to 1 drop of superwash dilution for all of the rainbow works that you've seen. Valender's Red. The only organization I have for my brushes is old dead brushes, makeup brushes for dry brushing, and use these brushes. Gray Mouser, first one I pick up. Yeah, so here, I'm afraid of this, but I'm going to show you anyway. I'm going to embarrass myself. So here's one of my brush cups. Here's another one of my brush cups. This is just the stuff that's on my desk. There are more brushes elsewhere. Not a lot more. Miniature brushes. There are a lot of art brushes as well. But so this is why I need a system, because that madness. And honestly, I need to go through some of them, because some of them I just probably won't ever use, and they need to either go to new homes or get thrown out. All right, I have to count very briefly, so there won't be a lot of dialogue. Because I certainly fulfill the artist stereotype of not math, please. So that's 5 drops of paint and 10 drops of brush on sealer, aka matte medium. And I do always spot my mixing brush lately. I had a bunch of these brushes with blue handles. They started out as paint. Okay, they started out. I had a friend who does one of those paint and drink type things, and that's like a franchise. So you have like the head office that has ways you do things, and one of the things that they would do is they had an agreement with one of the art stores, like I can't remember if it was AC Moore or Hobby Lobby or what, where they would buy these brush sets. And they don't use this size. So I'm partly mentioning this in case any of them and any of you do events, miniature painting events where you need brushes, because brushes are like the hardest thing to get donated. Like Reaper doesn't make their own brushes, so they have to pay someone else for brushes. They're not getting them at the same rate as the things they can make in-house. And that's true of just about any miniature company, so it's very hard to get brushes donated. But I had this friend, and then they're like, oh, we got like 100 of those things at home. So I got those and used them in paint and takes for years, but eventually, even with some maintenance, a paint and take brush does not have a happy life. And eventually, it cries uncle. And then those ones are my mixing brushes. Well, okay, assuming they aren't completely caked up with paint and destroyed. But the ones that won't form a point anymore, even after various treatments, which, as I say, I do want to do an episode on that, because there's a way to kind of, you can never get the point back to being brand new brush, but you can use warm water to restore it a little. I mean, at least get a little more time of dry brushing or base painting or whatever less precise work you're doing with your brush out of it. So now we can probably see where the paint is pooling up a little too thickly more, and we see some bubbles. So yeah, I wasn't counting all the paint tape brushes that are sitting in a drawer. Some of them, I think I'm just about to give up on. I found a bulk brush deal on Amazon that wasn't too terrible, so I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna fork out for replacement brushes at this point, instead of spending hours and hours trying to make these brushes be less stupid. And then COVID happened, so I never actually got to do many events with those brushes that I got off Amazon to see how they held up or if people hated them or what. Because people sit down, they always want like the tiniest, bittiest brushes they can get. And it's like, this is what we have. This is what was donated. This is what is free today. You can go with that or go find your own stuff. We do have limitations. But sometimes that would be nice and paint eyes for people. Because I know how annoying that is. If things were slow. And no one needed help. I haven't tried to show eye painting on stream because I just don't think this camera is up to it. Unless I find some creature with very large eyes we could use as an example, but even giants and stuff, I don't think the eyes are big enough for you to really see what I'm doing. So what would be the point? I need a drink of tea before I cough, but I have to get to a stopping point with the islands and whatnot. Okay. Gray mustard. Oh yes, I have a system of some are in the wet palette, some are in a cup. Those are the ones I don't care about. Some are in a dollar store basket lying down, some are at work. Those I use for glue. The ones at work are the ones in the dollar store basket. Hey Majar Aznabal. I'm sorry, I probably butchered your name. Gray mustard should really be, bro, I don't like people using my brushes. Yeah, I don't like people using my workhorse brushes that I use. Because if they're going to get wrecked, it should be by me. And they will get wrecked. But hopefully, it will take a little bit of time. I am kind of rough on brushes, it seems. Because Anne's always saying hers just wear out and get thinner and thinner and better for detail work, and I don't have that happen very often. Mine lose their point and are less and less good for detail work. In fact, sometimes I can tell if I need a new brush because I'll get at my backup brush and put the two together. And if one's at least a millimeter shorter than the other, then I know I probably do need to unpack that backup brush. I actually need to get another backup brush because I lost a brush at Reapercon. So that one didn't wear out, but the backup brush had to be called into service. And I like having a backup one just because I don't always notice the brush going bad. It'll be like one night I'm painting and I just get really irritated. Why does nothing seem to be working? And then I'm like, oh, why don't you check if your brush is still good, dummy? So after many years of this, I've developed the habit of keeping a brush of the most important types and sizes that I like to use in a drawer so that if that happens and I'm being a dummy and I'm in the middle of a deadline project, I am not messed up. My local art store does carry the kind of brush that I like, but they don't always have our itty bitty sizes in stock. And then there's been a couple of years now where for one reason or another there's been a disruption in the sable brush availability. One time, several years ago, it was because Fisheries and Wildlife had changed a form that people need to fill out to import brushes, and most of the sable hair brushes are from Europe or England. So the supply just dried up because it took these companies a while to figure out the forms and get it all filed and filled out in triplicate and whatever else it is they had to do. And then I don't know what the problem was most recently, but there was some kind of problem. And there just seemed to be, like, everybody had brushes on back order, but nobody was sending you brushes. I was like, well. And then I did order them, and they kept pushing the date out. It would be like, you'd go look at the web store, and it'd be like, wait, that date's a month later than the last time I looked, and that date's like 3 months after what it said when I bought them. Grey Mustard said, if you clean them a lot in brush cleaner, I think they get thinner and thinner until they're useless. I do not clean my brushes as often as I used to, but I do. When I do, I use this stuff. I don't use maybe that's what changed, because I don't use the Winsor & Newton anymore, because I used to kind of dip them in the Winsor & Newton liquid one, and then leave them on the side of the sink for a minute, and then come back and clean with this. And I think I was cleaning them way too often, and they probably were breaking down that way. And eventually I was like, I think I might be wrecking my brushes by cleaning them too much rather than too little. So I cut way down on the frequency that I clean. And I stopped using the Winsor & Newton. It just seemed like maybe that was too much. I will, for synthetic brushes, like those ones that get abused at paint takes, use isopropyl alcohol if stuff is really gunked in there. But I would not do that to a natural hair brush, because I know it's not very nice on my skin, so can't imagine that it would do a brush any favors. So I know having to dilute these might seem like kind of against the point. And if you are trying to paint just straight out of the pot, I'm pretty sure that contrast or speed paint or whatever other thing is already on the market is probably going to be more appealing to you. These do work best when you are willing to do some mixing, because there's only 12 colors, so of course you have to mix. And if you're willing to mess around with dilution a little. And I know that's not going to appeal to everyone, but I did not object. I was intrigued to see that Vallejo is working on their version of these. It seems fairly imminent since they've started letting people on YouTube say stuff. See, there's an example of why you should not poke things that have been drying a minute. I started lifting the paint up. And I might have to make just a little bit more of this mix to finish his legs. So this is an interesting, here I'm okay with the fact that I'm not going to get both sides of it. I'm trying to stop the leading lines on the sides, because it's rare that we look at a figure like this. Like, we're most likely to look at a figure in that orientation or that orientation. So if something is going to go a little wrong, I would rather, have it on an edge. And now, I don't know if I have enough to finish painting this fur area, so I'll very quickly mix up some more. and abuse this poor brush. I mix with it. I do try not to mix with my good brushes, although it's usually when I see, you know, the painters I very much admire painting, they are often very unkind to their sable brushes, and they will just mix and do everything with them, and I think they probably just accept that, you know, their brush is only going to last 4 months or 6 months or whatever, and then they give a new one. Sometimes your time is worth more than having an elaborate brush system, I suspect. I think I feel like there's a little white spot that I can't quite see on the side of that leg. And this is, you can probably see that this brush has a little hook on the end, which is the downside of synthetic brushes, but it's actually useful for some, like things like this. It's easier for me to get under these overhangs or into some of these little crevices with that little hook. So for base coats and washes and stuff, I like having a synthetic brush that's come to a good hook. Sometimes it splays and that's not very useful, but I like having a good hooky brush to get under those cloak hems and whatnot. So sometimes it's stressful when that brush dies, because it's like you can't guarantee that a brush is going to hook the right way. You gotta just grab a new synthetic brush and use it until you see whether or not the hooking is correct. Alright, I'll try and double checking for places that I missed, like right there. Oh, and the whole bracer, because I said I could leave that until tomorrow if I wanted, but I would rather paint it today. And have these guys done. Although then I guess I have to take pictures of them for Ron. When I was painting the others, I would stop and try to, you know, after a section, try to find bits where I had missed the white. But as we discovered when I was sharing the rainbow, I did not always get that correctly done. So I don't know that there is a magic solution to this problem. There's definitely too much paint there, but that's probably pretty dry, so I think I'm just going to live with it. You learn over time when to rinse them. So if you like the color, are you adding water or something for a contrast effect? For these super washes, if I want a contrast type effect, I would prefer to add that brush on sealer. So that'll keep the property where it goes in the recesses like that. If I wanted to use them as a glaze or more of an airbrush way, which it seems like a lot of people use them this way, I probably wouldn't. Well, I might use them as a brush glaze. I'm not as comfortable with the airbrush glazing as people like Aaron, who is very unkind to his airbrush. I agree. I think Liz has to periodically make him clean it. Nope, I said I wasn't going to put stuff down here. So these are when it's thinned with water. And this is when it's thinned with the brush on sealer, and this is Reaper's Wash Medium. So depending on whether I wanted that effect of it's going to tint the surface and gather in the crevices, or if I wanted more of an even tint, for this product at least, I have not tested this with other products because I don't have any other products. For this product, that is how it works. There's a little bit of chipping there. That's not the stuff, that's down to this is just a coat of white paint over a gray. These chalks are gray. And I tried to get all the sides because there was texture on all the sides. But I guess it wasn't exactly this gray because this is Bones USA, I think. This is one of the base boss samples. And these ones, so these are actually the prototype ones. These are not the real ones. And it's a prototype paint. It's the prototype superwash next to the most similar color of Reaper Clear. And you can see that the properties are not the same. The Reaper Clear has a much more even like it makes an even coat, where the superwashes do this thing where they go down in the crevices. And I guess now that I have the release ones, I could take those same colors and paint them near there, just for like posterity's sake, because I think the colors change slightly too from the prototype ones. I did not have the black at the time that I made this, plus there's not a Reaper Clear black. So, there. Grey Monster says Liz likely cleans it for him. I don't know if she would take that effort, or if she'd just give him the stare until he does what he's supposed to do. Next time there's an episode of House of Vex, we should try to find out what happens to get Aaron's brush cleaned on the rare occasions that it gets cleaned. And that's one of the reasons I don't use the airbrush as much, because I'm not willing to not clean it as much. I'll probably clean it too much, and then it's just like, it feels like all I'm doing is cleaning the airbrush instead of painting. And I'm like, I think I could do this faster with a brush. Like a regular brush. So it's a disincentive to me to use an airbrush if I figure I can do that thing less painfully or more quickly with a regular brush. But I am kind of known for liking to do things the hard way, so I'm probably not a good example of how to live your life on a variety of levels. So yeah, they definitely did some color changes between the prototypes and the final release. And now I have more wet paint to try to not bump into. All right, we have 20 minutes left. What could we do? Well, just in case, trying to put this away somewhere, because just in case anyone came a little later, this is the Halloween figure that's going to be in this year's Ghoulie bag. This is Cynthia the Wicked, and you can't quite see him because the black paint is there, and I haven't done any shading or highlight on it yet, but her hand is on this adorable little cat that is standing on top of the pumpkin. And of course she has a broom. And I've only got one of the two colors that comes in the Ghoulie bag on her so far. That right there is Dungeon Slime. And then the other color, well, the color is on her because it's in the shadows of her skin, but it's not very obvious, is the Ghoulie bag purple. So the Ghoulie bag will be the figure, the two paints, and then I believe you always get some candy too. And that's what the two paint colors look like. And I will be using them in a variety of ways, which I will chronicle in a blog post, I'm sure, to show you how you can do cool things like use it for skin. This was one of my tests for the skin. The color I ended up using is kind of like that. And then her hair is going to be kind of like this. And then with, I think, probably just black in the shadows, but maybe I'll use blue liner or something. Because I love blue liner. You know how I love blue liner. It may be almost too much love. So there's like a couple little areas that it looks like I missed on his base. I wonder if I can figure out how to fix that. I'm just going to move some stuff around. Because I think one of the things this kind of paint might be useful for is like sort of speeding up shading and highlighting, or shading stuff like bases, rocks and wood and stuff like that. You don't only have to use them in the intended manner, and I mean any of these. What did I come up with to call them? Tint and wash. Any of these tint and wash paints. I mean, lots of people are coming up with different ways to use them than the people who came up with the paints may have intended. I'm trying to figure out how my wet palette is too dry when We are having quite a bit of humidity where I am. Just way too much humidity. All right, so what did I make the gray with? Who knows? Possibly bone shade and a little white would be my guess. So I do also keep a little bit of white and a little bit of standard black, since this is a blue black. Sometimes when you mix it with other things, you'll get a different color than you might expect. So it's useful to keep pure black and pure white, or any of the whites are fine. Like, I don't have pure white with me right now, so I will use dragon white. But then because those paints are more opaque, you need just a little, it's like becomes like the anti-shine additive. You want to just put a little brush tip in and see what happens before you go nuts and lose all your transparent properties. And if I hadn't already painted this, I'd probably just use, you know, standard gray. It doesn't hurt that we've got some of these white areas kind of shining through that are going to essentially be the highlights. But I could do those with dry brushing or whatever as well. Maybe I will just give a second coat over where I was very clumsy on the feet. But I was painting these on the show floor at Reapercon, where the lighting is maybe not amazing. He's a big guy. Well, we're just doing the base, so I'll zoom back in. So, and I do this with standard painting too. I like to take colors that I used on the figure, or colors that fit with what I used on the figure, and work them into the base. So even if it's like stone or wood or something, I try to include other colors in the shadows. Just to sort of integrate things. So I know I used a lot of chestnut on him. And I think I used some of that leather brown. And then there's some yellow, but I had to mix that yellow with something to make it ogre-y. And do I remember what? No, I do not. We will experiment. Because I don't want to go in with like pure yellow. Would look weird on the base. And this is when I do this with standard paint. Usually I'll do like an initial round of some shades and highlights on the base and like local colors that are similar to what the thing is, and then I'll come back in with thin down versions of paints that I've used elsewhere on the figure and work them in. And then the other trick is to not be too uniform. Like, I'm putting this yellow on some of these highlight areas, but I don't want to put them on all the highlight areas. Something like rock or wood or skin, or a lot of things really. There's a lot of variation in it, in nature usually. And even if there are some surfaces that are like super uniform, it is boring if things are too uniform, so it's nice to mix it up. So I'm going to put some of that heavily thin down. This is the Chestnut Brown, which perhaps I thin down too heavily. And then if I think it's too much, I can just rinse out my brush. But I'll probably put some things on top of that, so I'm not going to sweat it too much. I was talking about fear earlier. And this is an example. It's like I could do stuff that looks weird and messes this up, and then I'll just do more stuff on top of it until it doesn't look weird and messed up. Or maybe I ruined this and it becomes an experiment and I learned something. That is fine too. think we need to stop being less afraid about stuff like this. We are not being graded on our miniatures. And if someone out there gets obnoxious and says that's stupid and you shouldn't have painted that color, or these things are only this color, or whatever thing, that is that person's problem. That is not your problem. I especially don't like those you should have painted this color arguments. It's like, is this not a fantasy creature? Can I not paint him how I want? I mean, I'm not saying, you know, when like Ron is all like, shouldn't you paint a brown bear brown? That's like, he's the art director. He's allowed to decide he wants his orcs to look a certain color or whatever. But when, after you buy the orcs, you don't have to follow Ron's belief of what color orc is. Ron's belief is that orcs are very pasty, by the way. Like, I worry about their health. Grey Monster says, bases are a good place to mess around, and I agree. And you can iterate fairly quickly through bases, too. Plus, we were talking about how, you know, I like to start painting in places that are less obtrusive. Well, often your base is not, you know, sure, if I put some teal on there or something, that's really going to pop out and people are going to notice that. If the rock doesn't look 100% perfect in every section, people are probably not going to notice that. They're probably going to be spending a lot more time looking at the ogre being an ogre than they are at the rock being a rock. Now, I do want to still try to bring out the texture of my rock if possible. I'll accent the dips and the sharper edges and so on. I mean, his rock is actually turning out to look quite different than his girlfriend's rock, I think. I use white in the highlights on this. I have not done that over here yet. So that is definitely one difference. So I'll try a little bit of that. Which does highlight, I guess, another thing that might be useful when you do experiments is to write down what you did or take pictures or in some other way chronicle what you did so that if you do like it, you can do it some more. Or I guess if you don't like it, so you don't do that same thing again accidentally. And I was just goofing around with the other orc and I didn't really write down what I did. Because I was away from home, so I didn't follow usual procedure as much. Yes, if you want to see me mess around with bases more, or with more regular paint instead of these, there is an episode when Reaper was wanting the Base Boss 2 with the little inserts. There's an episode where I painted like the same one 8 different ways or something. Yes, so Graham Monster saying a better way to look at stuff like color and similar critiques is to say, I don't like it in that context, but I think you executed it well. And I've certainly done that to myself where I didn't like things. Things were well painted, but I didn't like how it came out. I've had the opposite too. But that is something to remember when you put your work up online, especially if you have done something like, say, traditionally, if you're painting fire realistically, the light colors are in the center. Like we talk about white hot. So you look at the center of a gas flame and the white is in the middle, and then it's blue around the edges, or a standard wood flame. The white and yellow are in the middle, and then the orange and red are more on the outer areas. You might decide you're painting a fire elemental and you want to paint it the opposite way, where it looks hotter on the outer edges. If you post that online, there will be some person who thinks you did it wrong. Even like if you did it as a conscious choice. And they're allowed to have their opinion, but you need to not let yourself feel bad about that. Because you can't make everyone happy. So if you decided that you wanted the outer edges to be hotter because that's how fire elementals attack, or whatever reason you decided you wanted the fire to look that way, then that is your choice, and that person doesn't, you shouldn't let them make you feel bad about it. They just don't like it that way. And that's okay. They just maybe are bad at realizing that other people are allowed to do things that they don't like. Because a lot of people on the internet seem to be bad at realizing that people can do things a different way that they don't like. I mean, maybe not just the internet. I'm sure that we do that in person too. But we can't stop people saying stuff. We kind of have to work on just letting that go. And you'll get the other thing where, you know, if you post on Reaper, you're more likely to get an enthusiastic response if you post a Reaper figure, because everybody that's there, just about, is a Reaper fan and to get excited about Reaper stuff. And then if you post something else, maybe you don't get a very excited response. That doesn't mean that something else that you did is terrible. It just means that, you know, most people kind of respond to subject matter and colors that they like. Like when people are looking at your painting, they're not just looking at your painting. They're looking at your whole figure. They're looking at the figure you chose. If it's, you know, this person really loves undead or whatever, or like I don't love really gross miniatures, you know, where they're like slimy and pussy and stuff like that. Now, I tend to admire when people do that well and gross me out even more. But maybe when I first started looking at stuff online, I'd be like, oh, I don't like that. That's a terrible miniature. That's about my preferences, or, you know, liking something just because you love blue and they painted it your favorite color blue and you think it looks amazing. That doesn't mean that the person who posted a green miniature didn't do a good job. That just means maybe more people who like blue looked at the blue guy's figure. And that's not even getting into the whole, if you post on Instagram, a lot of it is about what the algorithm likes, not even what the people like. Like right now, the algorithm is super into reels, so anyone who's posting reels is getting featured more, and that has nothing to do with how good their stuff is. That has to do with Instagram, for unknowable reasons, feeling like it needs to be TikTok. Well, and I could have called this done probably like 5 minutes ago. I'm just kind of having fun at this point. Because I think it looks pretty rock-like. I'm not loving this, so I want to kind of blend that in a little more, I think. And I can just look for any other place like that where I had a rough edge and kind of use some of the, mix with a bit of white in it to fade that out. gave me a nice, pretty natural looking stone look without going to too terribly much effort. The camera, for some reason, does not want to focus on it. And we'll compare. So there's a little less color in hers, I think, and it's a bit of a darker stone. It's a similar idea. I guess I didn't take any of the reds that I used on her and put them in the base like I normally would. They're standing in different parts of the cave. And now I'm looking at hers. I don't know if I got enough depth, not enough depth on hers. I'm going to come back in with that black and just get a little bit, because the sculpting on her base has these kind of steps that I like a lot. I want to accent that a little. Yeah, these are very easy to just take a dry brush, and, a damp brush, and clean around the edge. I probably should have gotten a smaller brush to do hers, but I did not. Yeah, I think I feel like I can see the texture a little more now. Do more highlighting too. And I probably wouldn't use the finger blending on like a cloak or something, but a little extra texture on a rock is only going to be a bonus. Yeah, I think I'll call the bases on those two done. This guy now has there's still some leather pieces, but there are quite a lot of metal plates on him. Before he is finished, I might just have a big painting metal episode one day and finish some of these guys up. You can experiment with the washes or working up from dark to light, or there's lots of different ways to paint metal. So I think that's about it for today. Let's see if these guys are close to dry. I think they're close enough that the shininess isn't going to be too distracting. So you can really see the blue a little once the Nox Black is thinned down. I think I could see a few little white spots in there because chainmail. Let's see, I'll give you an example of how you can get unexpected mixes when you're using a not neutral black like that. We'll try a few different colors. So that's the yellow. Let's get the red, because I bet that will be different. Where did the Nox Black go? This is the Nox Black. And this is pure black, which I will, of course, need to use much less of. Although the Nox Black is pretty potent too. So I will start very conservatively, especially for yellow, because it does not take a lot of black to affect yellow. I don't know if you can see it. There's kind of it's turning green, which, I mean, yellow and regular black will also turn green, but this is turning a richer green than I would expect mixing yellow and black together. Because what I should be getting, I mean, it does seem kind of khaki, but let's try the regular black and see what happens there. Sorry, it's super shiny, so I'm having to lean off to the side. All right, that's not as different as I expected. It is a little more of a khaki. But now let's try the red, because I bet this will be more noticeable here. This is probably going to go pretty purple. Or this stuff is totally going to make a liar of me. But I know when I was working with the prototypes that I had some problems trying to get some of the colors to desaturate was my challenge. Because they were all very richly pigmented. I was getting like purples and stuff when I was trying to get dull colors. So that was a terrible example. There you go. I'm failing on stream for you once more. But there are definitely, because it's blue-black, you will get some unexpected results or things that will not desaturate as much as you expected. Or there's some other, let's try magenta maybe. Well, I don't know that I'm proving my point there either. But trust me. Trust me that it does make a difference that there's a little bit of blue in here. And you can see a little bit of blue. In fact, I would almost say that that's kind of similar to Blue Liner, which does mix a lot of great shadows, but it doesn't always mix the same colors as Blackwood. So it's not exactly the same, but it's definitely kind of in the same family as Blue Liner, I would say, at any rate. So I like it, but I would still keep a true neutral black around for various purposes. Probably the red superwash. That one was the red superwash. So that one was the red with the both of the blacks, the superwash black and the regular black. I know that stuff like green and red is usually something I would do to make it neutral, and that did not happen. It made an awesome color, but it wasn't brown. Because when I first had prototypes, I had no brown, and that was a real problem. So, like, I like this color, but it's not brown. And a lot of things in miniature land are brown. But I do love those kinds of grays you get by mixing pigmented color complementaries. Because I've always loved magenta plus green for a super neat looking neutral. Like, and this kind of green, so it won't do it with every green. This kind of green specifically, that with a magenta just makes super cool colors. I mean, like, and now we made teal. How is that possible? I don't know, but it is. It's beautiful. Now I have to paint something that color. You can eventually get like more of a gray like that other thing. Because it's not always equal amounts of the color. Like some colors are more potent. So you can't just put like one drop and figure that's going to do it to get the neutral. You kind of have to goof around. because now I probably have too much of the magenta. But you get some pretty neat colors. But it's useful to keep around the white and black. And then when I didn't have the browns that are in the set, I used the oxides. So the red, yellow, and brown oxide mixed a little bit with some of these was how I made like neutrals and skin tones and stuff like that. And that still might be useful to have, since those are kind of like, they're very opaque, but they're like the equivalent of the clear colors for earth tones. They're very pure color. And they make great skin colors. So just in case we had anyone come in near the end, I will show the Halloween stuff again. So this is the figure that's going to be in the ghoulie bag, which should start, I think it starts October 1st and goes until supplies run out. Somebody hopefully was on Reaper Live and will correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's $40. If you spend $40 or more, you get a ghoulie bag for free in your order. Plus whatever the mini of the month is as well. That's on top of the normal promotions. Hey Rex333, thank you for subscribing for 30 months even. And the ghoulie bag includes this figure, which will be in Bones USA. This one I got before the molds were ready, so this one is metal. But I'm sure it will look pretty much identical. Oh, you can see what the back of the sculpt looks like. I have not painted anything there. And then you can see that the kitty's tail. He looks funny because I painted the cat black, but I didn't paint his tail white yet. And then the two colors that come in it are Dungeon Slime, which is currently available. And then Ghoulie Bag Purple is now known as... Crap. I knew this a minute ago. Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane Purple. And it looks like this. And then I'm trying to use those colors in a variety of different ways on the figure, and I'll have a blog post about that so that you can see different ways you could use these colors. So I'm using them as highlights and shades as well as painting them as themselves. And that's what's happening on her shirt. That's shaded with black. I think I'm using solid black because it's a slightly warm black. And then her skin is shaded with the purple, and there will be purple on it. Here's my kind of test figure that I did working some of these things out. And this is what the black looks like highlighted with the Dungeon Slime, which I will be painting next because I have all those mixes done up in my ceramic palette and set aside with sponges on. Grey Mouser, I don't know because I'm Canadian and it's really $80 to get free things because of the free shipping. Yes, so whatever I'm saying applies primarily to the US store. I believe these should be available in the other stores, but the amount that is required to get the free deal could be different. I am Canadian, but now I live in the US, so I only know what happens in the Reaper US store. Well, okay, I guess I'm also a US citizen now. Some people acknowledge dual citizenship, some do not. So you can take your pick of which you think I am. So those are some of the colors in use. There will be orange on there, obviously, because she's got a pumpkin. And then we get the color triad of purple, orange, and green, which is always a good one. Very Halloween-y. Oh, and you get snacks in the ghoulie bag too, like candies and whatnot. Probably not a coffee crisp. Speaking of things that are Canadian, they taunted me by sticking a... there's going to be a special... Pokey Tool for Halloween as well. That's not in the ghoulie bag. It sounded like it was going to be sold separately. And they had one as to show off, but to make it stand up straight, they stuck it in a coffee crisp. And I'm like, well, now I just want a coffee crisp. Which I can get here. If I go to World Market, I could get some coffee crisp. But like now I have to drag my butt out to World Market just to get a coffee crisp. There are other Canadian candies and stuff that I miss as well. Although some of them you can't even get in Canada anymore, it seems. So that's weird. Very odd. Because my mom like searched all over for cherry blossom and now you can only get them like in Newfoundland or something. I'm like, okay, Canada, what's up with that? But anyway, I think I have bored you all with weird color combinations enough for one day. And hopefully next week I'll feel a little perkier and we'll look at basing. I don't think I left Sophie on my desk. But it'll be what I got the question about, and what I want to show people is if you have a base like this, but you want to fit it into a standard size base, or you want to extend this, or for whatever reason, how do you do that? And I will show what I did on the Sophie that I painted for Reapercon. So I guess I'm going to let Queenie find us a raid. She agrees that $40 for US sounds right, but is also not 100% sure. I'm sure that they will tell us again, and probably this Thursday, since there's going to be a Reaper Live before all the Halloween stuff goes up. We will hopefully, maybe I'll try to remember to write it down this time so I actually know. Oh, but I'll just show the color. These are the con colors that probably are limited edition. So if you wanted these, this is the VIP Triad, and I'm not sure that I showed that one enough. I suspect that is not as shiny as it looks there. And then this is what they're calling the swag bag Triad. And then these little cool dragon head Pokey Tools are limited edition. So this stuff is all up right now on the Reaper store. And then there's a brush holder that's limited edition. But I think the other thing, oh, well, and the super washes. The other things, the figures like the Reapercon Sophie, and there's various figures from the factions and whatnot. Those are just releases now. Those, if you decide you want some of the bone pander people, or the ghost walkers. I know that was the faction I picked, and now I can't remember their names. It's very embarrassing. Grey Mouser, Ganong's chocolate, chicken bones, ribbon candy, and barley toys. We might be from a different part of Canada, Grey Mouser, because I do not know what you're talking about. I don't think I ever had a barley toy. It sounds like you can't get pink elephant popcorn as much anymore. Goat Walker. I think it's Ghost Walker. Ghost Walker. Yeah, you guys get different candies by the sound of it, Grey Mouser. Do you still get cherry blossom? I mean, if you really want the feeling of like knowing that cavities are forming on your teeth, cherry blossom is the way to go. You just feel the sugar eating into your dentin. Anyway, I really am going to let Quindy find us a raid now. I'm sure that I'm old too, Grey Mouser. I'm sure that she knows or can find someone who's doing stuff that people who enjoy miniatures would think is cool. And I will sign off and see you guys next week. If you have any questions about the basing thing that you want to make sure I look at, feel free to drop me a private message, and share the Reaper Love with Peach Lixo. Bye, everyone.